Hello, and welcome to The Mind of a Therapist, a podcast where I interview psychotherapists and helping professionals and what they're passionate about in order to provide you with messages of encouragement and hope. I'm your host, Andrew Earl. The Mind of a Therapist is sponsored by Psychological Counseling Services, healing hearts and transforming lives. Look into our intensive at pcsearl.com. In today's interview, I interview Carissa Emory. Carissa is a certified IFS therapist and licensed clinical social worker in Oregon and Washington. She works with adults and adolescents in her private practice, providing IFS and EMDR therapy for a wide range of clinical issues. Carissa has completed her Level 2 training through the IFS Institute and has served as a program assistant for Level 1 IFS trainings. She is particularly interested in the spiritual dimensions of the IFS model and finds joy in studying dreams, symbolism, and the art of tarot. I think you're going to enjoy this engaging conversation on IFS and dreams, and just want to say thank you for listening. It means a lot to me that you take the time to listen to these episodes and support us in this way, and hope you'll enjoy this episode. I also wanted to invite you to reach out to me at the email is themindofatherapist@gmail.com, and let me know any feedback you have, episodes you've been enjoying, topics you'd like me to cover, guests you'd like me to have on. I'd love to hear from you and be of service to you, so please don't be shy. All right, here's the episode. Carissa, thanks for being on the podcast today. The first question I generally like to ask guests is, what's your take on change? How do you view change? How does it happen individually? How does it happen maybe in relational systems? Or, I know you have trained internal family systems. Within our internal systems, what does change look like? What does it take to change?
Yeah, well, thanks for the warm welcome, Andrew. It's nice to be here. I really love this question, actually. And where I land on this, I think beliefs is the first thing that really comes to mind when in terms of change. I think our minds are incredibly powerful, and beliefs have the power to shape both our internal experience and in turn the external experience, right? So there's this book, Emily Nagoski wrote this book called Come As You Are. It's a book about sex. It's really great. Yeah. But in it, she has this metaphor that I really love. And she talks about, our belief systems are kind of like inheriting this garden plot, right? So you got a garden plot and maybe it has all these vegetables that you don't even like at all. And some really old stuff, inherited from your grandparents or our culture. And it's not really working for you now, right? Anyways, I hope that metaphor makes sense, but yeah. I see therapy as kind of helping us take stock of what's in that garden plot, right? What are the beliefs that we formed in childhood? Where they come from? Who gave them to us? Do we like them still? And if we don't need them or they're unhelpful, then we can uproot them and get them out of there to get, what actually serves you, what vegetables you actually like, right?
Yeah. Wow, that's a perfect metaphor for me because I am a gardener myself, and yeah, and I think of even, if you're inheriting this gardening plot, it could also have, it could have been neglected. It could have, maybe it was sprayed with pesticides to just knock out the weeds, and you don't want your vegetables to have that residue. And so, yeah, that right. Process of how do I regenerate? How do I nurture this this system that I've inherited while changing it?
Right, exactly. So many of our beliefs were laid down in childhood where we didn't have the capacity to deal with things that came our way. And as adults now, we probably do. We probably have the capacity to deal with life, really, if we get rid of some of those beliefs. So that's the first thing that comes to mind with change for me. And the second, like you mentioned, really is relationships, but active relationships, right? And in IFS, of course, the relationship with yourself is the primary one. And, as social creatures, we need other relationships too, right? I work with a lot of people, though. They're missing that kind of active component to the relationship. They might have kind of got some beliefs in childhood that relationships and love are just kind of either have them or you don't. And, um, you know, it's about luck or something like that, right? But yeah, I just feel like with relationships, both with ourselves and others, we can actually do really hard things, right? If we feel supported and loved and nurtured. Um, Without that, we don't have the same kind of resilience.
Yeah, it takes that internal work, but also the external change as well. And we are social creatures. We've always lived in tribes, and I guess there's maybe people
Mhm.
here and there throughout history that have lived by themselves, in isolation. But we definitely need each other, and
Right.
that's the difficulty when we form connections with our caregivers growing up, and they hurt us. It's this, okay, I want this connection, but at the same time, this is painful. Go away, and then that often,
Right.
however that unique dance looks like, then shows
Yeah,
up in our, relationship with our spouse, friends, etc.
sure. Influences those beliefs, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know you've done work with dreams. You've incorporated dreams into
Mhm.
your IFS frame and your work with people. Be curious to hear a bit about how you came to become interested in dream work, and
Yeah.
a bit about your backstory and journey into interest in dreams.
Yeah. So I would say I've always been a pretty active dreamer and, you know, have pretty vivid dreams throughout my life. And I've always been really interested in that. So I think I started taking a dream journal. It must have been like 16 or something, started writing down my dreams, and I'd pick it up and I'd put it down. And, I'd notice that when I had the practice of doing that all the time, I would get a lot out of it. And then if I didn't do that, I would really not be connected. I'd almost forget about that part of my life. Right. So in the last few years, and before I started IFS, I started like learning a little bit more about lucid dreaming in particular and
And for those that might
medit
not be familiar with lucid dreaming, what is lucid dreaming?
yeah. Yeah, so the word lucid really, meaning awake, right? So it's a spectrum of lucidity, but some might say a fully lucid dream is one in which you're dreaming and you might even be able to control aspects of the dream. I used to be able to do that as a kid just naturally. Um, Lots of people have that experience too, and then they end up losing it at some point. Um, but it's a thing you can practice and get better at, right? It's a spectrum, though. I mean, I'd say any awareness of the fact that you're dreaming is starting to become lucid, right? So the most common, Andrew, is if you've ever woken yourself up from a nightmare, for that brief period, you knew you were dreaming for a second, you knew you could wake yourself up. Well, you were lucid for that couple of seconds, right? You were aware. So nightmares are actually a great entry in.
Yeah.
They're not fun to experience, of course, but for anyone who's interested in getting a little more awareness, it's a good entry point.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, the lucid dreams is kind of on a spectrum of how it can look like for people. The basic would be you notice you're having a nightmare, wake yourself up, all the way to the point where you could literally control your behaviors, control even parts of your dream if you are really practiced in it.
Right. Yeah, and I'd say even like a little bit before that, just with awareness, right? I'd say even keeping a dream journal is kind of starting that process. Very low on the, lucid part, but there's awareness building there, right?
Yeah, and so you started doing that when you're 16 years old. You start waking up in the morning, jotting down what your dreams were and keeping a record of it, and you continue this practice and then and you start researching more about lucid dreaming and how does this continue to evolve for you?
Yeah, so before IFS, I really liked the dream interpretation side of things. I still think that's really fun. And it's still interesting to me, but it's not therapeutic. Um, so I'd say I got kind of lucky that I'm learning about lucid dreaming right as I'm learning IFS and, getting to synthesize those two things, kind of deepen them at the same time. Yeah. So, and I know your listeners know about IFS because you've had a lot of people on that really explained it well. But for the purposes of this conversation, I just want people to keep in mind that systems thinking kind of approach that, you know, we're not just one thing, we're a system of parts and self energy, which is our core energy, calm, compassionate, curious. My other favorite word for self energy is our internal healing intelligence.
I like that.
Yeah, me too. So, you know, Freud and all, whoever else, the dream interpretation and analysis people, even that word analysis, right, is very like, we're cognitive, we're learning, we're going to figure this thing out and crack the code, right? So that it probably has some merit, but with IFS, there's a difference when we're coming from self energy, where we can just be with and be curious about, and we don't necessarily have to go up into the head trying to figure this thing out, right? So let's start here. So in my level ones that I've participated in, IFS mentions dreams, right? They mention that it's a way that our parts get a hold of us and might give us information or get our attention. Now that's wonderful, right? And Dick Schwartz will say, if that happens, if you wake up with a really vivid dream and you notice how your body feels, you might sit with that and see what part is there, right? And get to know that better and take it through what we call the 6 F's, finding, feeling, fleshing out. That's wonderful, right? And it's kind of reactive, right? I'm waiting for the dream to come to me before I'm in an active relationship with it. And I'm kind of saying there's another way to be proactive, right?
Yeah.
So that's where this metaphor of a telephone comes in, where, I'm either dialing out and being active, or I'm picking up the receiver when somebody calls, right? But to have it go both ways, to have it be an active relationship, that's a lot deeper to me.
Yeah, and you talked about the lucid dreaming. You talked about keeping a dream journal. Those two examples of what dialing, that internal system, dialing the parts of us in that dream state could look like. Or are there other ways too?
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, exactly. Those, I would say, even just having the intention
Yeah.
to pay attention to our dreams and let our system know that is that proactive side, right? And yeah, there's lots of other ways to be more active. And, you know, I guess I can just share a little bit about how I work with clients,
That'd be great.
give some examples. Yeah. Yeah. So let's see. So my lovely clients gave me permission to use these little snippets here.
No, that's nice.
Yeah, yeah. So I have a client who's experienced sexual abuse in the past, and recently, brought this dream into the session where they were locked in a room with somebody and really wanting to get out, and they couldn't scream, right? And that really stuck out to them. And they came to the session really with those feelings still raw. And so, okay, we're not going to try to understand from up here, right? That would be my analytical part hopping in. I want to help them understand from, you know, a really curious, really open place, probably a place that's more based in the body, right? So inviting the client to sit with those feelings just in curiosity and see, this one's a little bit obvious, but what need comes up for them with that dream, right? Well, I need to have a voice and I don't have one, right? Okay, let's sit with that, you know? And what ways do you want to meet that need, right? Here, your system is telling you of this unmet need. Well, in curiosity and compassion, what can I offer back, right? So, came up with lots of things clients willing to try and trying to find the voice. I kid you not, the very next week, they let me know they had a dream where they were screaming their head
Wow.
off and had found their voice. And so amazing to me, you can put just a little bit in. That wasn't a huge intervention. Um, but obviously, it had some impact. Her
Yeah.
system's letting us know it was heard, right?
Yeah. By acknowledging that part of her that felt like she didn't have a voice, and getting curious about what does this part need, it'll allow this part then to express itself that week in her dreams again with verbally.
Right.
Is almost a giving permission. You can have a voice. You do have a voice.
Exactly. Right.
Wow.
Yeah. Active, right?
Yeah.
I'm not just sitting and interpreting, although that's fun for me, but I'm actually engaging. I'm talking back to
Yeah.
the dream imagery, right?
Yeah. And that's how in the field of psychotherapy, dream work kind of began, from my understanding, is this analytic, let's analyze and stay in the head. What I'm hearing, your efforts are to connect from the heart, from that self, and it's more of a active
Right.
experiential contact with
Hmm.
the part of the person that is expressing itself in the
Sure.
dream.
Right. Exactly. And actually, that brings up another good point is, dreams are bizarre and there's reasons in the brain why that is. And so interpreting sometimes, not the most fruitful experience. So sometimes I don't always know who I'm talking to or what part of me, or is that coming from self, or I'll give you an example of mine personally. I had a really vivid dream like a couple months ago, and I'm going through some pretty exciting but new kind of life changes right now. And so I have this dream that I'm riding a bike on the Fremont Bridge in Portland, and all of a sudden I get like sucked up into this really dense, really nice gray fog. And it's just taking me up, up, up. And I go to kind of like move my body or try to get out of it. And it's like, nope, I can't do that. The only thing I can really do is kind of surrender and keep going. Right. And I just woke up with this like amazing peace, and sitting with that, you know, peace. It's something I've called back. It feels like a gift from my system to me of something that I needed in wakefulness, and I can use now, right? And I don't know what part gave me that, or if it was a part, that doesn't really matter, right? I'm using it.
Yeah, a using
Yeah.
and a turning towards, yeah, with that curiosity and um I was talking on the podcast recently with a guest, Sarah. She's a psychoanalytically oriented clinician, and she is talking about, a big focus of hers, and it's so similar to what you're talking about. And IFS is like a turning towards and accepting of what she talked about as the unconscious, and I think that that's just so valuable to. It's like oftentimes, we have reactions, or like parts of us that don't want to go towards certain parts of us,
Hmm.
sometimes for good reason. But
Hmm.
um
Sure.
that posture of embracing, because you like this experience sounds like was a very positive one, but
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
I would imagine that you've taken that posture with the parts of yourself that haven't had the most pleasant
Right.
experiences and are
Sure.
suffering in different ways.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And it reminds me of, one of the 8 C's is courage, right? I mean, it does take courage to go to some of those dark places. And the nature of dreams, because we're really hyper emotional and the amygdala is really involved, fear, anxiety, all sorts of difficult emotions are really pronounced at times. And I work with a lot of people who've had nightmares and as a PTSD symptom, right? So that's a place that we really lean into that courage. But again, I've seen amazing things happen with my clients. I'll give you another
Yeah, I
example.
was just gonna ask if
Um,
you could share another.
yeah, great. Yeah, I'm so thankful for my clients. So one dear client of mine had been having really intense nightmares, on repeat kind of thing. Um, by the way, when something's repeating like that, that's a pretty good sign that we're not getting a memo that our parts are trying to tell us, right? So they keep going on repeat. So they were having these kind of dreams that they're getting chased, they're running, and I invited them to stay awake because they'd be waking themselves up. So I knew that they had a little bit of awareness there, right, that we could work with. And so stay awake, and instead of running, try to face, try to bring some courage, right, to whatever's chasing you. My client has so much perseverance.
Hmm.
They were able to do that after practicing. It took them a while. Um, but they finally did it, and says to me, the minute that I ask this thing that's chasing me, what do you want? It falls to the ground, right? It totally transforms. It's pretty amazing.
Wow.
Um, yeah. Lucid dreaming people, there's one guy who, if you're interested, you have to check out. His name's Charlie Morley, and he does a lot of lucid dreaming for healing work. But he'll say that's so common. I mean, if you face what's in your nightmares, give it a hug, whatever zombies chasing you, it will fully transform. So that starts happening for her in her dream. And in real life, we're tracking other changes with her fear that are transforming, right? I'm less afraid in my dream. I have this courage I built up, right? Well, that's impacting her waking life. She's becoming more courageous when she's awake, you know, because she had that courage in the dream.
Wow. I just want to say thank you to this person for allowing you to share this, and it's touching to me as you're talking about that, and inspiring because I have my own demons that I get scared, and definitely comes up in my dreams, but just that having that persistence and courage that she had to
Yeah.
like face this scary entity in her dreams, and how
Mhm.
powerful that parallel process, both in her dream life, but then in her day-to-day life, right? That started
Right.
to shift as she took that active stance in her dreams. She simultaneously started in this process of
Yeah.
courage in her day-to-day life. That's is inspiring.
Yeah, it's pretty profound, right?
Yeah.
And again, a pretty simple intervention. I mean,
Yeah.
didn't cost any money
I
to
yeah,
work with the dream.
absolutely. I know for with my own experience with dreams, I've uh told the story at different points in my life that I don't have dreams, and I know from the research that isn't true. I do dream. Everyone dreams in REM sleep, right? But
Mhm.
I just wouldn't remember them. And I actually have done a dream journal for one small stint when I was in college.
Mm.
I was studying, psychology, and the concept of dreams came up, and I was like, okay, it's amazing how even if you don't remember your dreams, if you go to bed with the intention of I'm going to remember, and then in the morning you wake up and say, I'm going to
Yeah,
write down my dream right when I wake up, everything I can remember. If I don't remember, just write, and see if something comes. But if you can
right,
really stay diligent with that, and it's all about this active intentional posture you're talking about, because even
right.
since we talked a couple weeks before we had this conversation, and even that conversation, I've had more dreams since we talked, because I've
Wow.
just had the intention of, okay, like I'm doing my own personal work right now. I think I
Right.
will the rest of my life. But
Mm.
okay, this is another time where I can be attentive to what's coming up, to if there are recurring
Mm.
messages, if
Wow.
there's material in my dream, and I haven't had as detailed dream, because I've kind of fallen off the bandwagon the last week or so with that practice. But initially, like if you really get in that practice of I'm going to remember my dreams, you'll start
Mhm.
to remember them more, and then what great opportunity to like
Right.
thicken your relationship with yourself.
Absolutely. I'm so happy to hear that. And it's been my experience that when you do bring awareness to it, something happens, right? I mean, like I said, it's a relationship, and whatever parts are in there expressing, they want to be witnessed, they want to be heard. And so if you're listening, they're going to talk.
Yeah. Oh, that's so
Yeah,
great. Well, is there
it's
anything
really
else
cool.
that you have flown around in your head around this topic of dreams? I feel like I have a completely new understanding around dreams as a possibility for getting to know myself better. Is there
Mm,
anything we
it's
haven't
great.
touched on surrounding dreams?
um, well, just one more kind of note that some of the depth really comes from tracking over time, right? Which is very different than that old school, we're going to take one dream and analyze the heck out of it. The practice of being involved in your dream and coming back and back and back really just deepens it. It's not just about one dream, really. I mean, sometimes that you get a lot out of one dream, but it's really about the practice.
Yeah.
Right.
That's been my take on internal family systems too, and like a lot of the approaches that really resonate with me is it's not, there's not an end goal necessarily. Like we can make shifts like this client you're talking about that really are life changing, but it's not like there's psychotherapy interventions that just get rid of these parts, right? And I
Yeah.
love that Dick Schwartz talks about that. It's a process. He's been doing this work for a long time, and
Mm-hmm.
this concept of tormentors. We have people
Right.
in our lives who torment us, but they also mentor us in terms of like illuminating the parts of us that
Yeah.
need attention, the emotional baggage, the burdens that are still
Right.
there that need healing, and so it's not like, yeah, we can just look at one dream and come to this deep insight
Yeah.
that'll change everything. It's more this process even in our dream life of being with these
Mm-hmm.
parts, and it's a lifelong journey.
Right. And it's that active quality, right? Like I said in the beginning about the same thing, our external relationships will kind of, deflate if we don't pay active attention to them. Same thing happens inside of us. I mean, you know, it's an action of love to keep it going.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
the research certainly supports that with our external relationships. I was just listening to a podcast with the Gottmans. They were on Dr. Hyman's podcast and just talking about how their research has shown that it is that active process of like showing curiosity with their partner. Even then, they're I think in their 80s probably, maybe they're older, and they've been doing couple research forever and applying it to their own relationship. And they say they still take time every year. They do a week-long vacation and up in Canada, and they write down curiosities they have about their partner.
Oh,
What it, and it's ever evolving, right? So that's
yeah,
super important for
yeah,
our intimate friendships and romantic relationships,
totally.
also for ourselves too, with having that curiosity about what comes up inside. And it's
Mm.
a beautiful parallel process there.
That's really cool. Yeah, it's kind of, there's not really an end to that energy inside us of being curious and open, right?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I was noticing on your website that you use nonviolent communication and the enneagram, and I
Mhm.
have a bit more experience with NVC, not as much with the enneagram, but I know it really has resonated for a lot of people. And be curious if you'd be open to talking a bit about your experiences with the enneagram, how you find it helpful for folks.
Oh, yeah, sure. Um, Man, I'm obsessed with the Enneagram, and it's another thing that's a really active, ever evolving process. Um, it's so funny. It's this very simple symbol. If anybody's seen it, it's a circle with a hexagram inside and a triangle shape. It's endlessly complex, though, once we stay with it and stay active with it. Anyways, for those who don't know, the whole premise is there's basically 9 ways um, of personality in which our essence gets blocked by our kind of human personality, right? So, how do I want to say this? one thing I really appreciate about it is it's not a flat kind of, Myers-Briggs is amazing as well, but it's kind of just descriptive, right? The Enneagram's really dynamic. So it shows us how you're one type, but you also go from there's lines of movement within it, right? So there's lines of stress and strength that we go to for each type. So, anyways, just to say that the complexity and the dynamic nature is there that makes it a really deep, it's beyond just descriptive. And it kind of gives us a path of self actualization, if that's possible, right? Not sure if that's fully possible, but it's a path of growth.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
if I'm understanding right, the 9 different types are uh, like provide us with strengths that we have, but also
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
stresses in ways that we
Oh, yeah.
block our natural essence. Then that's kind of what
Right.
the personality types are describing.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the thing. I mean, for those who've studied it, you'll see there's just so much truth. I mean, we're very complex people as humans, but we kind of have the same basic issues some of the time, right? Either control, anger, power, self esteem, whatever. There's different types we'll notice. Um, what do I want to say about it? Sorry, I was a little unprepared to talk about this.
Oh,
So.
I kind of caught you off guard with it. I'm the
Oh yeah,
same
no,
way
it's
where I'll
okay.
get going on something but yeah, there's these
Yeah,
different I'd be curious to hear a bit about how they how you've seen the Enneagram be helpful for the people who consult
yeah,
you,
yeah.
maybe for yourself personally.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. So, primarily as a tool of self understanding, which is so helpful. In IFS, we talk about unblending, right? With the Enneagram, once I start to see my type structure, I can get some space from it. Wow, I can really see it more clearly and see how it shows up in my life and kind of start to work with that. Start to all of us, you're right, we have different strengths. Um, are there's 9 types. So one time out of 9 is you're probably doing the thing that is the most healthy and makes the most sense. Other times you're probably not. You're probably locked into this way of being that might not really be helpful. Um, so to kind of take a look at all the different strategies, that's one thing I love about the Enneagram. It's like a celebration of diversity of personality,
Mm,
really. So I can draw on these aspects other people might have naturally. I might not have so naturally, but I can kind of learn their strategy, appreciate that, right?
mm,
Gain some of the wisdom in that because each of the 9 types has their internal wisdom.
mm.
Yeah.
So a way of
So,
both coming to more awareness of oneself and the wisdom we have, also the areas of stress and
mhm.
learn more about ourselves, but also to be able to see in others, kind of have a frame for
Oh, yeah.
here's the wisdom of the people around me. And I mean, what a yeah, that's so helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. So, talk about relationships, often we're kind of operating from the assumption that we're all the same or see the world, how could this person not see it the way I'm seeing it? What the heck? Well, they have a totally different frame for seeing the world than I do. The Enneagram helps me understand that. Okay, they're a totally different type. You have totally different strengths. Well, now I can take it less personally too, That's just how they are, right? doesn't mean they can't grow or whatever, but it just helps me not have so much judgment, right? And understand the people I'm in relationship with much better.
Yeah.
I don't know, you know, only good can come of that to me.
Yeah. Yeah,
Right?
what a helpful tool, the enneagram. And then also I was thinking of IFS with uh, that concept of tormentors that I was talking about earlier,
Mhm.
and then also, acknowledging people's protector, the nastiest parts of people, like the parts that do the
Yeah.
worst things in the world. Like it's never helpful just to judge that part without seeking to understand and just say, that's pathological, that person's crazy, that person's
Right.
narcissistic, that person's borderline. The list goes on and
Yeah.
on of in our field and outside our field of ways to judge people. And
Totally.
tools
Right.
like the Enneagram and then IFS, where we can the ideas of the human experience itself furthers our capacity to like be understanding and curious. I just think that's what we need more of, And it's not that
Yeah.
simple because
Yeah.
we have our own triggers, we have our
Sure.
own parts that get activated, and they do whatever their uh, coping strategy is, to point the finger, to withdraw. But just having the awareness of that idea for me has been
Yeah.
big. When I see someone get activated, it's like, okay, I have the
Mhm.
opportunity here to learn about what's going on for this
Sure.
person. This isn't just completely random, completely irrational. And yeah, I don't know,
Right.
bit of a rant
Right.
there, but I love these tools for
Yeah.
cultivating more empathy.
Yeah. Exactly. Understanding, right? The Enneagram is a circle, and circle represents unity and oneness, even though there's diversity amongst it, right? It's kind of like the self with parts. That's the wholeness there.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, Carissa, we're getting about to the end of the interview here. Before I ask you the last question I generally ask guests, can you share your information if people want to get in contact with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So my website is innerexplorationsTherapy.com, and I see clients in Oregon and Washington via telehealth. And yeah, that's it. I don't have an Instagram or anything like that.
That's perfect. I'll send. We'll put that in the show notes, and if people want to get in touch, they can reach
Oh,
out to you.
yeah.
Hmm.
Andrew, I also have a few books, to recommend for
Please.
anyone who's interested on dreaming, if you want to put that in the notes.
Great. Would you mind mentioning them right now?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And maybe
Uh,
just like, if you can just kind of give a brief description of like what the content is.
yeah, sure. Sure. So I already mentioned Charlie Morley, who works with lucid dreams and healing. He wrote a great book called Dreams of Awakening. There's this fabulous woman named Catherine Shainberg, who she's a PhD. She owns this place called the School of Images in New York City. So she does a lot of work on healing through visualization and dreaming. Her kind of theory is we're actually dreaming all the time because we're always visualizing stuff in our heads. So, a great book is Kabbalah and the Power of Dreaming that she wrote. Stephen LaBerge, uh, he's like the main lucid dreaming guy, classic author. He wrote Exploring the World of Lucid Dreaming, and that is going to have all the skills. If somebody is interested in developing that skill, all the tips and tricks are in there. Unlocking the Emotional Brain by Bruce Ecker was it really, as a therapist, really solidified it. It basically tells you exactly why IFS, EMDR, and other modalities really work, as opposed to some other modalities. A lot of it, there's some brain science in there just talking about the visual brain, the emotional brain, and how we need that part of it to actually have lasting change. And then a man named Alan Hobson wrote this book called The Dream Drugstore. That one's really cool, and it goes into some detail about the brain science of dreaming and psychedelic experiences and how those really overlap in a lot of very interesting, profound ways.
Well, that's a lot of good stuff. I appreciate that. And you did such a great job at giving those concise summaries. I'm impressed. I don't know if I could do that if someone asked me to list out 5 books like that. And you did a good job. I think this idea that you've been talking about and that you've been, implementing in your work of supporting people and taking this active approach with their dreams is something I didn't hear much in my training, and I don't hear much about, psychotherapists talking about. And so I think, for anyone who's listening, who's a researcher, anyone who's listening, who's a therapist, I think that this could be a very fruitful area of focus in the IFS community, but also just in the psychotherapy community in general, because these clinical experiences you're talking about is just powerful shifts people are making in their lives as they're making them in their dream world. So, thanks for sharing this, and thanks for taking the time today. The last question I like to ask guests is, what's a message of hope you'd like to leave the listeners with?
Yeah, thank you so much, Andrew. Honestly, it ties into what you said. The message of hope is, tonight you can start this process. And just like you said, Andrew, just a little bit of intention could lead to some really cool, exciting changes. Getting in touch with, how powerful you are, right? And all that good stuff that's in there somewhere just waiting to be uncovered, right? It's free, it's simple. You can start tonight if you want.
No, I love that. And I love having a message at the end that's like actionable, Anyone who's listening can give this a whirl and learn a lot about themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
Great. Well, thanks so much for being on the podcast today, Carissa.
Thank you.
Please press the subscribe button, as well as rating and reviewing our podcast. This helps others connect with what you've been hearing. If you have any questions, please contact us at themindofatherapist@gmail.com. These questions will be kept anonymous. I want to thank Eric Price for the wonderful music you hear in this podcast. Additionally, this podcast was created to provide accurate and authoritative information on the subject matter. Although we are interviewing licensed therapists, they are not your therapists. This podcast is not intended to serve as direct medical advice and should not be used as a substitute for direct professional help. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, publisher, guests, or PCS are rendering legal, clinical, or other professional information. If you need a professional, we encourage you to find one. Visit Psychology Today to connect with a licensed clinician near you.